It is 1877. The Vanderbilt family throws a party in New York City. The guest list is a roll call of American power. The decorations cost more than most Americans earn in a year. 50 years later, the grandchildren of the man who built that fortune are struggling to keep the lights on in their mansions. How does a family take the single largest private fortune in American history and make it disappear in 2 generations? Grab something to drink. This one is painful. Cornelius Vanderbilt was born in 1794 on Staten Island, New York. His family had very little money. His father ran a small boat moving goods between Staten Island and Manhattan. Cornelius dropped out of school at 11. At 16, he borrowed $100 from his mother, bought a small sailing boat, and started carrying passengers across New York Harbor. That is the entire starting position. One boat, 16 years old, $100. And before you say, well, $100 was worth more back then. Yes, it was. It was still not a lot. This is not a story that starts with advantages. What Vanderbilt had instead was a terrifying ability to work, a habit of undercutting competitors on price until they quit, and zero interest in losing. By his 20s, he was running a small fleet. By his 30s, he had spotted something bigger, steamboats. Steam was replacing sail across American waterways. Vanderbilt moved in hard. His method was simple and brutal. Enter a route, charge far less than everyone else, absorb the losses until competitors either sold out or paid him to go away, then raise prices once they're gone. People called him the Commodore, partly out of respect for his control of American waterways, and partly because the nickname saved them from saying something less polite about how he operated. By the 1840s, Cornelius Vanderbilt was one of the richest men in America, and he had built every dollar of it himself. Now, we get to the move that turned a rich man into a dynasty. In the 1860s, Vanderbilt looked at the American railroad business and saw chaos. Dozens of competing lines, badly managed, fighting each other. He started buying. He took control of the New York Central, which connected New York City to Chicago and became the backbone of freight and passenger travel in the Northeast. At a time when railroads were the internet of their era, the thing everything else depended on, Vanderbilt owned the most important ones in the country. When he died in 1877, his estate was worth about $100 million. That was roughly 1.15% of the entire American economy. In today's terms, economists estimate that equals somewhere around $300 to $400 billion. For a man with his origin story, that number sounds insane. He started with a borrowed $100 and a boat. He ended with roughly $1/3 trillion in modern money. The math on that is almost offensive. For most stories, that'll be the peak. A man who came from nothing to become the richest of his generation. For the Vanderbilts, there's a lot more to come. Cornelius died in January 1877, and almost immediately, things started going wrong. He left about 90% of everything he owns to one son, William Henry Vanderbilt. This was deliberate. Cornelius thought most of his other children were bad with money, and he was not wrong about that. He knew that if you split a fortune too many ways, it stops being a fortune. Money kept together grows. Money spread thin disappears. The problem with that clever arrangement was that William Henry had 8 children. So when William Henry died in 1885, just 8 years after inheriting the wealth, he divided his estate among all of them. The concentration his father had spent a lifetime building was now spreading outward like a spill on a kitchen floor. And it's worth noting that Cornelius was right about his son when it comes to his ability to manage money. William Henry had more than doubled the fortune during his short time managing it. He was smarter than people give him credit for. But his story also told us something else. You can be a brilliant businessman and still have no clue about succession planning. That specific flaw was what destroyed the greatest family fortune ever built in the United States. The setup William left behind, multiple heirs each getting huge sums with nobody in charge of the whole thing and no rules saying you had to keep the money working, was a time bomb. This is the part where anyone who works in financial planning is quietly screaming into a pillow, because what happened next is a masterclass in what not to do with family money. The Vanderbilt grandchildren had been born rich. They had never had to think about money the way Cornelius had. They never ran a business, and never watched a dollar and wondered where the next one was coming from. What they did instead was build houses. Extraordinary, beautiful, wildly expensive houses. The Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island, built in the 1890s, had 70 rooms and cost the modern equivalent of roughly $150 million to build and decorate. Marble House, another Newport mansion, was built as a birthday present. For context, most people get cake. Mrs. Vanderbilt got a house made of marble with a ballroom covered in gold leaf. The lifestyle across the family matched. Parties, European vacations, art collections, yachts, jewels. The money was not going back into businesses. It was being turned into things that looked impressive but earned nothing. Meanwhile, the railroad business that had created the fortune was changing. Competition was growing. Government rules were tightening. The family's hold on the industry was loosening, and nobody was building the next big thing to replace the income. On top of the spending, the family fought. Vanderbilt heirs sued each other over inheritance. They went through expensive divorces. They made bad investments. The fortune was being hit from every direction at once. Overspending, no new income, legal battles, and too many heirs splitting what was left. Now, who actually came out ahead during all of this? The lawyers, the architects, the art dealers, the jewelers, the divorce attorneys. The Vanderbilts were funding an entire economy of people whose job was to help them spend their money. And every one of those people got paid, whether the fortune survived or not. By the early 1900s, the fortune that took one man a lifetime to build was scattered across dozens of heirs, each spending as if the money would never run out. It ran out. Now, brace yourself for this detail. By 1973, a family historian gathered Vanderbilt descendants at Vanderbilt University, which Cornelius himself had founded. Not a single person in the room was a millionaire. If that doesn't land, I don't know what will. And if you want more stories like this, support us by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are plenty more dramatic stories to come, but we can only keep making them with your support. And now to the main lesson from this story. Anderson Cooper, the journalist, is a Vanderbilt on his mother's side. His mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, told him she was not leaving him significant money because she believed it would damage him. That is a position Cornelius himself would have understood completely. The man who built it all knew that money you didn't earn changes you. He just didn't build a system that could survive that truth across generations. By contrast, the Rockefellers, which we covered in another video, built trusts, foundations, and legal structures designed to protect not just the money, but the discipline around the money. That is the difference between a dynasty and a warning. And this pattern is not ancient history. Studies consistently show that roughly 70% of wealthy families lose their fortune by the second generation. By the third, 90% is gone. The Vanderbilts are not the exception. They are the rule. They are just the most famous example of something that happens all the time. The Vanderbilts were not bad people. Many of them were talented and interesting. They just inherited a fortune and no instructions for keeping it. And what followed was $300 billion gone in 2 generations.